Morning everyone. So having done the video on how to organise the inside of your pack yesterday, I've got everything set up in bags, so now's a good time as any to start to have a look at how we actually put that into a pack and configure our overall setup so that it's as easy as possible as we're walking through the trip. Now, there's not really a disastrously bad way to do this, but there are a few things that are worth thinking about as we go through that can make things a little bit easier for you on the walk. The good thing about this particular topic is obviously you can change it as you go. So you can iterate and try different combinations on different days of a walk until you get one that you're really happy with. In general, there's a couple of things that we're trying to achieve when we're packing the inside of the pack. And the first is thinking carefully about our weight distribution. So generally we want everything that's heavy, we want that at the bottom of the pack and as close to our own back as possible. And what that does, if you put the weight at the top, every step that you take will cause the pack to sway like this. And that's pivoting, obviously, the base of your spine with a 25 kilo pendulum hanging off it, which over a 15-kilometre day is a terrible idea. So keeping the weight low and close to your own back is the most important thing, and the pack itself will be designed in some ways to help that with things like water bladders, for example, almost invariably being stored along the back plate of the pack. The second one we want to think about is accessibility during the day. What stuff are we going to need during the day? So that generally is going to drive us to make sure that we've got ready access to wet weather gear if the stuff changes, ready access to sunscreen, our lunch, any insect repellent that we might want, toilet paper, any of that sort of stuff. We need to be able to access quite quickly, and it's a real pain to be out on the trail somewhere rummaging around through your pack trying to find any of those items. The last thing is what's that going to look like when we arrive at the camp, and as I talked through in the previous video, the assumption we should always make is that we're going to be doing that set up under the worst possible conditions. It's going to be windy, it's going to be rainy, it's going to be dark, and we still need to be able to get our camp set up as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So we're going to do this a little bit differently today. Instead of going forwards from an empty starting point and then packing the pack, we're actually going to start at the end point. It's a little bit easier to show you how it all comes out of the pack. So I've set up my full kit here, and we're just going to slowly pull it apart one block at a time. What I'm going to do first is just describe a little bit of the general overview of how I've done this, and then we'll pull it out and have a look. Okay, so generally speaking, what we've got on the outside here is the tent and the ground sheet and any group flies or anything else like that we're carrying. That could well be wet from the night before, so it doesn't necessarily make sense to have inside your pack in any event. It will be the first thing that you need when you arrive in any event, and so a good place to stick it is just on the outside of the pack at the bottom. These things are generally reasonably light, and that at least keeps the weight low down. In behind that, at the bottom of the pack, is all the sleeping gear. So this sleeping gear cell will be one of the heaviest cells that you have in your pack. It's got your sleeping bag, your bedroll, any liners and pillows that you're using, and so that sits at the bottom of the pack. It's also a critical piece of gear, so it's well shielded from the rain and weather. Sitting up here in 3 vertical channels, my wet clothes, my warm clothes, my cool weather clothes, shorts and t-shirts, and in the middle is the pack that holds the stove and all of our food. And each of those is oriented vertically, so it can be accessed from the top of the pack. On the side, I carry 2 water bottles, and in the back I carry a 3-litre bladder. A lot of people only carry a 2-litre bladder, but you need to get a sense for what your water consumption is and carry water accordingly. The water bottle on one side, I usually carry either empty or mixed up with an electrolyte drink from the start of the day. And once I rip through that, then it stays empty typically until we get to camp. The reason I'm carrying that is twofold. A, to mix up electrolyte, although I could do that in a cup. And B, because when you're at camp, it's actually a little bit annoying to keep pouring water out of your bladder. So I find that to have a couple of uses that make it worth the weight to carry it. On the other side is a life straw. This sits empty until I punch a hole through, not a literal hole, but until I start to drink a lot of water from my bladder. Once the water bladder starts to become low, I pull this out and just fill it up from creeks as we're going through. The life straw gives you some filtration that provides protection against a range of things, not everything, but it does mean that you can walk forward with a little bit more confidence just knowing you can top up, and that keeps the total weight in your pack down by saving the volume of water that you need to carry. These front pockets, lots of packs have these front pockets, particularly the more technical packs. Travel packs usually won't. The best thing I've found to put in the front pockets is either gaiters or a set of camp shoes. A lot of people use Crocs or a pair of thongs to do it, and they tend to get muddy, so I just slip them in the front of the pack there. At the very top of the pack, the Osprey packs, at least this series, have the rain cover in the top, so you lose a bit of space at the top of the pack because of that. The other things that I have in there, and we'll have a look in a minute, are things like my rainwear and other stuff that I need during the day. And then just in between there and the clothes is where the first aid kit sits. So it sort of gives you this stack where the stuff at the bottom is the camp, and that can come out by itself. The stuff in the middle can all be accessed from the top all at once, and then I've got stuff that I need for during the day sitting up in this top drawer. So let's have a little bit of a look at how it works. Starting with the tents and so on. We can clip that off, get our camp set up, and get going. Now, the lighter weight the gear that you've chosen, the easier it is to manage the total volume of your pack. So just one of the many things to keep in mind as you're going through. On a more technical pack like this one, you end up with secondary zips. Now, on a travel pack or a very ultralight pack, you won't necessarily have this, and so you might need to think a little bit differently about how you're getting into this area. But in this case, I pull that out. That's all of the sleeping gear that we're going to need, and I can just throw that straight into the tent that I've just put up. The Osprey packs have a compartment divider in the bottom, and what that's doing is it's now keeping all of that other stuff from falling down into the bottom of the pack. I find that very useful. If you're doing a configuration where you're just putting a single large pack liner into the pack and putting everything inside that, you can remove this internal compartment, which will help you manage that space better in that scenario. But for me, with that sleeping gear out of the way, having that kept at that level means that when I stand it up, I can now get into that from the top without having to reach too deep into the pack. So I find that feature to be particularly useful. The other thing the Osprey packs do is let you remove this section on the top, and when you do that, instead of having the top, you've got this secondary flap here which you can clip on. The function of that is just to simply reduce the actual weight of the pack itself, if you're not going on as long a walk, and you'd remove, I don't know, maybe 10 litres of volume off the pack by doing that. So it gives you some functionality to reduce the weight if you need to. Personally, I find that one a bit of a gimmick because the utility of this top piece, which also has the rain cover in it, is significantly greater than the weight that you would save by removing it. So within the pack itself, once we're in and rolling, the first thing that we're going to find sitting right on top is the first aid kit. and that needs to be in an obvious bag in a place where everybody can get it immediately. And so that's the first thing you'll always find on the top of my pack. Once we're down beneath that, we're down into the channel of three things. So cool clothes, warm clothes, and the food bag. And each one of those can just be pulled out vertically in that orientation in order to access whatever it is that we might want. And then of course, food bag. This will be one of the heavier bags that you have, particularly at the start of the trip. Your food bag will have a stove, which is a reasonably heavy single item, especially once you count the gas that goes with it if you're using a gas stove. And you'll have about 600 grams of food per day. That's for an adult man. Women might carry a little bit less than that, so just try and get your own judgment right, and sort of test how much you eat. But for me, I use 600 grams a day, and that includes all of my snacks, the wrapping, other sorts of packaging that might go through it, as well as the meals themselves. And that adds up pretty quickly if you're on a 5-day walk. You've immediately got 3 kilograms in that bag. So a 3 kilogram single bag like that is something that does need to be towards the back and in the center of the pack, and as low down as you can get it. And that's why we position it in the dead center. These sort of bags provide a bit of padding on either side of that when it's in the pack. So they're sitting in the pack lined up like that, and that's stopping our food from getting crushed. It's providing a little bit of resilience to any kind of vermin or anything else. But also the weights of these two bags are very predictable. So they're balancing out the weight distribution across the pack. And then as the weight of the middle one drops away, as we eat our way through our food on the walk, the whole pack still stays balanced without needing to reconfigure it on the way. So there's a little bit of method to that madness, but that's the final layer. And you can see that I accessed all of that in one go with one reach without needing to muck around with J-zips or anything else in this area. And for me, that's why my next pack probably won't have a J-zip on it. And some of these other elements here, which are just adding weight, I'll probably look to drop away. In the back, I've got a 3-litre bladder. Again, the size of the bladder you carry will need to be based on the climate that you're walking in, the availability of water on the track, and your own water consumption needs. In this piece here, in this mesh piece, this is where I've got a huge chunk of the stuff that I'm going to need during the day. So this includes my my cup that I use for just about everything, my power bank, which needs to be ideally protected in a pack. It contains a towel, a fork, some basic hydrolyte and other bits and pieces. So that all goes in there, and that's effectively my kitchen, so that when I stop or I need a cup of tea or whatever else, the kitchen comes out of the top there. The hip belts, when I'm doing a multi-day walk, what's usually in one of those is a camera in one, and my snacks for the day in the other one. You just got to remember that if you leave your pack on the head of a side trail, you need to take those snacks with you in your day pack to stop the vermin getting in. When I'm walking solo, the beacon always sits in one of these so that I can access it without needing to take the pack off. Finally, on top, the Osprey has the rain cover in the top, so that's kind of lost space, but it makes a bit more sense. If you're going to clip the tent on the bottom, there's really not a way to bring it up from the bottom. Stuff that I've got in here is my toilet paper and so on. I generally steal half rolls from home, so once they're about half gone, I'll take them. I find half rolls more useful
on a trail and full rolls. The full ones get a little bit too bulky. But if you kind of squash the tube in the middle, you can squeeze a little thing of hand sanitizer or soap into the tube there, and that sort of protects that a bit, so that's cool. Beacon, so beacon is waterproof, certainly this one is, so that means it doesn't need to be in a separate dry bag, and in fact I deliberately don't put it in another bag so that nobody has to go hunting to find this. If we need it, we're really going to need it, and we need to be able to put our hands on it straight away, so it does not go in a dry bag. Shovel to go with the toiletries. A day pack, lots of different types of these. This is an Osprey one. It's very light, very small, and we would take that on any side trails so that we're not carrying the main track. Sunscreen and insect repellent. Now I put sunscreen and insect repellent in these small silicone tubes for a couple of reasons. One is that I don't want to carry a big tube because it's just too heavy. I won't need that. And the second is because I find the corners of the tubes that come from the stores to be very sharp and pointy, and if they get in there and bouncing around with things like this, they can puncture these bags or even wear through the Ultrasil bags. So I don't take supermarket or store-bought tubes. I use these silicone ones. Final stuff that's up in here is my wet weather gear. Now your ability to get your wet weather gear into a pocket that size is going to depend greatly on the quality of the gear that you bought. If you buy low-end gear for whatever reason, you're going to really struggle to get that down to a size where it goes into a top pocket like that. But in this case, that's my outer range shell. Now again, that's not in a bag, and it doesn't strictly need to be because firstly, if it's rain that we're worried about, we'll be wearing it, so that won't matter. And the second thing is that even if it does get wet, these things are designed to be wet and to dry very, very quickly and to shed the water, even if they're completely saturated. So this sort of gear just sits in on top there, and I can grab that and any over trousers that I need whenever I need it. So that's fundamentally the setup that I use. So the exact way that you set that up, there's obviously a lot of parts of that where there's a huge amount of individual discretion. My pack is a more technical pack, so the approach that I've shown you is a little bit more suitable for that. If you're going down the path of having a single pack liner and just putting all your stuff in, a less technical pack is going to be the way to go, just to save weight that you don't need. But that is going to change the way that you pack and load that thing to a considerable degree. So just use your discretion with that and experiment and see what works for you. In terms of the technicality of that pack, when we're talking about a technical pack, we're talking about loops, J-zips, zips at the bottom, extra compartments, any kind of hooks for carabiners and so on. I do use those, and I'll often clip the Life Straw water bottle onto my pack on the front, so that I can use that as we're walking. I'll sometimes dry towels or that sort of stuff, and you can use things like solar panels, feeding power banks as well if you really can't live without your devices, or your power bank isn't otherwise big enough to see you through the trip. The piece that I don't use that is really just adding weight to my pack for no reason is the J-zip. With this orientation, so a J-zip comes vertically down the face of the pack and enables you to access the central compartment from the front. I've not found that to be useful at all, because in this configuration everything's accessible vertically in vertical channels from the food bags and the clothes bags and so on, without needing to do that. So there's no advantage in having a J-zip in that scenario, and that's probably something that I'd drop if I was buying a pack again in the future. So there's a fair bit that we've gone through there. A lot of it is highly discretionary, so experiment, find what works for you. This one, it's hard to have a complete disaster because you can repack it on the fly. So
So get out there, have a go, test your organisation. The sort of tips and tricks I've gone through there might be a little bit useful to you in terms of helping to just think and plan, but the absolute key essence of it is first, keep heavy items at the bottom of the pack and towards your back. And that stops the pack swinging with every step that you take, and that swinging creating a pendulum on the base of your spine, which is going to cause you a major problem on a long walk. That pack must hug your body, sit straight, and not rock as you're walking. Second one is make sure your first aid supplies, your beacons, are right on top where people know where they are and know what they look like. That means that we can get at them quite quickly if we need to. When I'm walking by myself, the beacon in particular goes on the hip belt where I can reach it straight away. Third, think about the stuff you're going to need during the day. Day pack, sunscreen, air guard, all of that sort of stuff needs to be in a place that's accessible and that you can then pull it out and get walking without having to go rummaging through for your lunchtime can of rum and coke or whatever it happens to be that you've chosen to drink at lunch. The final one is think about how you're going to unload it. How you're going to unload it is actually, in a lot of ways, far more important than how you load it. And being able to have a sequence where you arrive and the things that you need are available literally in the order that you need them in order to get that camp set up, assuming that you're going to be doing that at night in the rain, will save you a lot of mucking around and a lot of angst when that inevitable day comes that you find yourself in that situation. So as always with multi-day hiking, this is a choose-your-own-adventure style approach. So get out, experiment, find what works for you. Whatever you come up with, I look forward to seeing you out on the trail.